Good morning. Today is Wednesday, July 15th, and we're beginning a new gospel letter. A new gospel, it's not a letter, it's a new gospel, the Gospel of Luke. And when you look at the Gospel of Luke, you will notice in the very beginning of the gospel, verse 1, chapter 1, Theophilus is the person to whom it's written, attributed to, so in a sense it is a letter. And then there is an assumption that there is a volume 2, and that this, scholars think that this is a 2-part volume, and often call it Luke Acts, because the Acts of the Apostles is also attributed to the same Theophilus. And we assume that the gospel writer is the writer of both the gospel, the story of Jesus, and the story of the Acts of the Apostles. And so we put them together in a 2 volumes sometimes. So that's what that little section in the beginning is all about. And then the book of Luke is filled with beautiful parables, emphasis on marginalized and dispossessed individuals. Luke has the most women mentioned, named, included, involved in what is going on with Jesus and his ministry than any of the Gospels. And the other thing that stands out in Luke is, of course, the birth narrative. So in chapter 1, after we get done with deciding that this is a part 1 of a 2-volume work, we have the beginning of what we would read during our season of Advent. Zechariah and Mary. And so these 2 characters in the first chapter have actions and they're involved with these angels in this time. So the angel comes and visits Zechariah. And because of his unfaithful response to what the angel says, he is muted until the child is born. So Zechariah says, how will I know this will happen? And instead of just ending his question there with how will I know this will happen, he tags on this little bit about, because it is basically impossible. My wife is very old. And then the angel says, well, because you said it that way, you're not going to be able to speak until these things have come to pass. And of course, Elizabeth gets pregnant and the baby's born. So in the meantime, you can juxtapose the encounter Zechariah has with the angel with the encounter Mary has with an angel. Now we're talking about 2 different babies being born. However, Mary asks a question too of the angel. After she's told, don't be afraid, Zechariah is told the same thing. She says, how can this be since I am unmarried? And then instead of saying, don't be so unfaithful, because she's not unfaithful, she's asking a legitimate question, and then she stops it there. The angel gives her an answer, and her response after the angel furnishes the answer is, so be it. Let it be with me as you have said. And she's all in, because right after that, she has this beautiful poem, song, if you will. We call it the Magnificat, where she says, God has regarded me and he has taken the lowly and lifted them up, and he has done great things. He's filled the hungry. She praises God for the opportunity to be the vessel of what God is trying to do in the world. So she only does that all in praising after she visits Elizabeth, and there's more confirmation of what's going on. Elizabeth has the baby, and the child leaps in the womb when Mary visits, and Elizabeth could tell her, and Elizabeth is kind of the glue for all of this. And then the next part is where Elizabeth and Zechariah are the parents of John the Baptist, and the parents come to them and say, what shall we name the child? Elizabeth says, name him John. They're like, well, you don't have anybody in your family named John. So Zechariah asks for, a chalkboard, because he can't speak. He writes his name should be John. And as soon as he writes that is just like the so be it that Mary had vocalized to the angel. he writes his name is to be John. It just took him more time. He's older, and he is a person in a higher position, and it's harder to adjust. Mary was a young teenage girl, a little bit more adaptable maybe to the visitation of angels, perhaps. Maybe there's a lesson in that those of us who are more established, we're more entrenched in what we know to be true, which, by the way, Zechariah knew about miraculous births in the Bible: the birth of Isaac to Abraham and Sarah, the birth of Samuel to Hannah after she prayed. Those are the two I can think of off the top of my head. He would have known that as a priest. All of those miraculous births, the angel visits him, and he still doubts. So yeah, I think he deserved to be mute just for a little while. So when he writes that on the pad, though, his mouth is open and he's able to speak. And what he does is basically the same thing Mary did with the Magnificat. It's Zacharias, it's called a prophecy in Luke's gospel, where he talks about the miraculousness of this child that he's going to have and who he's going to represent and bring and announce into the world, which is Jesus, God's son. So there is Zechariah's song and prophecy, and that is the first chapter of the book of Luke. And the first chapter of the two-part volume, first chapter. So be it. Let it be.